Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Let's talk about the new moon in Aquarius, which is a pretty hot topic at the moment, given that we have 6 planets in Aquarius and one asteroid, the beautiful goddess Pallas Athena. So all those bodies are lined up together in the new moon chart, which I'll bring up in a moment. When I think about Aquarius, which I have a strong resonance with because I have very strong Aquarius in my own chart, the thing that comes to me is the ability to be free within myself, to be myself, to express my individuality, to find my personal self-expression that is not tied into a conditioned expectation, which is Saturn and Capricorn. So, last year we had all those planets in Capricorn, Pluto, Saturn, Sun. We had all this Capricorn energy, very, very strong, which really spoke to a lot of different things, and certainly from a collective level, the conditions of life as we were seeing it, the crashing down and deconstruction of all sorts of things. And now in 2021, Aquarius is such a futuristic sign. It speaks to the future. It speaks to individuation, individuality, and the human family, the collective, revolutions, revelations, waking up. So even though this is just a regular new moon, it's really important because of the lineup of all the energies in Aquarius and just the potential that holds for us moving into the future. So Aquarius corresponds, it's the 11th zodiac of the sign, so it's the 11th house as well. It corresponds to many different things, but it really is about finding your own true individuality and walking on that path of authenticity. And it's an opportunity really to find expression for your own uniqueness. Find the ability to be more authentic on your path, regardless of what's appearing external of you. This is a very interesting cycle with this new moon because Mercury is there as well, of course, and it's retrograde at the moment. And so Mercury retrograde, as we know, it happens a few times a year. It does create a lot of havoc relative to technological issues and so forth. As I previously mentioned, I lost all my files, which I haven't been able to retrieve. I'm able to retrieve bits and pieces through different means, so that's where that's at. But with Mercury retrograde, you see, if you have Mercury retrograde in your chart natally, then when Mercury does go retrograde, I don't think it necessarily has the same sort of impact. However, having said that, a Mercury retrograde, whether you have that natally or not, it is a process of going within. The natural function of Mercury is to give information out, right? It's the seeker of information, okay? Knowledge, learning, receiving data, and so forth. And a retrograde journey of Mercury takes us within in order to process what is already churning inside our own mind. And the retrograde cycle enables us to kind of sort through and filter through messages and knowledge that we need to understand better, that we need to be more clear about. And so the retrograde process, because it takes us within, it puts us in that position where we really do have to reflect mentally, on our life, on the decisions we're making, on the choices we're making, on the actions we're taking, on our plans, our dreams, our goals, whatever it is. So it sort of forces us, in a sense, to pull back, stop, reflect, rethink, revisit things, and reorganize things. It is also on a deeper evolutionary level, Mercury going retrograde or having Mercury retrograde natally really shows us that there's a process going on inside where we are sorting through information from the level of what we are observing and picking up on from our left brain, Mercury, and we are drawing in what our soul, literally what our soul is ready to absorb, understand, connect to, learn more about. And the information that is not relevant for our own personal soul journey will basically be discarded. So Mercury retrograde in this new moon is quite significant. Pallas Athena is right there as well. I'll bring up the chart in a moment, but there are a lot of highlights kicking off with this new moon because we have the square between transiting Saturn and transiting Uranus starting to close in, the first square. So that's a really important collective cycle and shift. And when you're talking about Saturn and Uranus, you are talking about the two bodies that couldn't be more different from one another. One is about freedom and one is about oppression or suppression or repression or depression. So there's a conflict and a fight between those two bodies. I'll actually do a separate video for that because I want to unpack that with greater depth, but I just want to highlight that it is connected to this new moon as well. The other thing is, of course, always look to where any new moon lands in your chart or any full moon. Now, the last full moon we had was in Leo. As I spoke about it, I said that it corresponds esoterically to Jupiter because Jupiter was right there opposite the full moon. And Jupiter is the ruler of Aquarius. So there was a strong Jupiter presence in the last full moon. And in this new moon, there is also a strong Jupiter presence because Jupiter is the esoteric ruler of Aquarius. Jupiter corresponds to ray number 2 in esoteric astrology, and it is the ray of love wisdom. Aquarius is a sign of humanity. It's a sign of individuality, of revelations, of waking up. So with this energy, what we could really say is that we're stepping into a time, a new cycle that enables us to find a more authentic expression of our own individuality relative to the human family as well. There are some pretty good aspects to this new moon. So I might just bring up the chart just to kind of make it a bit easier to follow. So this chart is drawn from my location. So never mind the location of the planets, that will change based on your own location. So there is the new moon at 23 degrees of Aquarius. I might just bring a little helper. So new moon, sun conjunct moon. Of course, that's a new moon. You can see I've just drawn over her, but that's Pallas Athena. Let's just how do I erase that? Never mind. Okay, so I'm just going to bring all this in. So this line that I'm drawing, pardon the squiggly effect, you can see the sun, the moon, Pallas Athena, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter. Oh, I forgot Saturn. How could I forget Saturn? And that's the part of fortune for those of you that don't know, that round circle with the cross inside it. Never mind the part of fortune for the purposes of this reading. So sun, moon, Pallas Athena, Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn. all in Aquarius. The Jupiter-Venus conjunction is first of all, one of the most spectacular conjunctions to actually view in the sky if you have that opportunity to see that conjunction. Venus-Jupiter conjunction is the most beautiful visually, but it is such a beautiful conjunction in terms of its archetypal description and how it feels in a person's chart, and how it feels obviously as a collective transit at the moment. So as you can see, they're actually exactly conjunct in this new moon chart. Now, Jupiter is joy and Venus is happiness, to put it very simply. So you couldn't ask for a more beautiful conjunction to emanate a frequency that can bring a great sense of joy and happiness in our process relative to where we are at the moment and relative to this new moon. Pallas Athena, the goddess of wisdom, of clear seeing, creative intelligence, is conjunct Mercury, is also conjunct this new moon. So we have a gift of Pallas Athena offering us the ability to see more clearly in our own personal journey of individuation and authenticity, to see it more clearly so that we can have a path moving forward that enables us to see how we are actually evolving and individuating. This whole stellium here of Aquarius is speaking to finding your individuality, finding your authenticity, and being able to stand in that regardless of what appears external of you. The North Node is forming a trine to this new moon. So the North Node is the moon's transiting node, which is the collective transiting node. In Gemini, obviously, Gemini forms a trine to Aquarius. So we have support there from the North Node, meaning that we have support towards our future direction from the North Node. Vesta is opposite Neptune. So this energy has been in play for some time now, but it's also connected to this new moon chart because it's still there. In fact, it's exact. Vesta's 19, Neptune's 19. That's our own spiritual development in the here and now, in the everyday nuts and bolts of your life, whatever it is you're doing, bringing in the spiritual dimension into your practical everyday living, the balancing of that, the awareness of that, making that more clear in your life. Oppositions, whilst they are a polarized energy to begin with, ultimately they bring about a greater sense of awareness. This new moon, however, does form a square to Mars. So that adds a little bit of tension without question. And that really speaks to a tension relative to our own personal desires, in that Mars corresponds to personal desires and the lower will. Pluto is the higher will and the soul's desires. So there may be a sense of conflict here with this new moon in terms of what we think, or what sort of attachment is a good word for Taurus, actually, where Mars is at the moment. The attachments that we have to our personal desires versus being able to be more open-minded, more able to be authentic, more able to individuate, to break free from conditions, from the conditions that are imprinted in our psyche, in our mind. And the other thing about Aquarius, of course, is because its planetary ruler is Uranus, it is also Saturn, but it is Uranus as well. The other interesting thing, of course, is that the square between Saturn and Uranus, which I won't unpack now, but just one thing worth noting at the moment is that The sign that Saturn is in, which is Aquarius, that's the sign that Uranus rules as well. So there's some what's called reception taking place between this square. That kind of helps a little bit of the tension that this particular square can bring to worldly events. Getting back to Aquarius, because Aquarius is ruled by Uranus in evolutionary astrology, it really does correspond to individuation, the process of individuation, which in short just means being able to live a more authentic version of yourself in your life, and discovering that more and more every single day, because that's not a journey that comes to an end. That's a journey that continuously blossoms and unfolds. The other thing about Aquarius and Uranus is that it can correspond to trauma or shock in evolutionary astrology, as it is explained and understood through that lens. The trauma and the shock comes about because material is activated that corresponds to some past experience, whether that's in the present life or whether that's in a previous life. And if the trauma, of course, is lying dormant and gets triggered, it brings about shock, right, in the body or in the mind or spiritually. So just have a think about that, because when you've got a stellium of Aquarius activating the energy of Aquarius, there's a lot that can come up that can it can make you also feel quite restless. Anxiety is actually something that really corresponds to both Gemini and Aquarius, actually. I've seen very strong Aquarius in the charts of people who do experience a lot of anxiety. It's an electrical energy that stimulates a lot of thought. There can be a sense of feeling scattered. There can be a sense of feeling excited, exhilarated, being able to break free from a lot of things that have held you back in your life. So there's a lot of good things about this, obviously, and there's some challenging things as well. And I think the challenging component is simply going to be spoken through the Mars squaring this new moon. As I said, it's the a sense of inner conflict that one could be feeling from the point of view of my own personal desires, Mars, and my attachment to those desires, versus being able to break free from old conditions, old desires as well, that will enable you to break the chains, as it were. I really like just a comment here I want to read from Jeffrey Wolf Green. He says Uranus rules electricity, electronics, and computers. God uses the medium of electricity to project the creation. In human consciousness, the brain is an electrical device. Uranus, Aquarius correlate with the synapses in the brain, the radio receiver that is tuned into God's station. I really love that sentence. I think that probably really resonates very strongly with all this energy here in Aquarius, and certainly with Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, because the retrograde cycle does take us within, right, to reflect and reassess a lot of the information that we've been absorbing. Okay, some of the other features as well. The Mercury and Pallas Athena being there very close to the new moon, particularly Pallas Athena. But Mercury and Pallas Athena together, we need to look at them together because they are very close as well. We're really looking at left brain, right brain. And with the archetype Aquarius, we're working with right brain. So this energy can stimulate a lot of intuition for us. We can activate sudden flashes of insight, sudden flashes of information that can be very liberating for us. It can provide a sense of waking up to something that we need to wake up to in our own life, that sparks that sense of a greater sense of freedom within ourselves, a greater sense of being able to be authentic, right? This is important because many people might argue, well, how can I feel free when I'm in lockdown? How can I feel free with all these apparent restrictions around me? And I've said this before and I'll say it again. Freedom at the highest level, freedom is a state that you experience within. If if your freedom is attached to the external reality, then you will forever, in some part, in some way, shape, or form, feel restricted. Because life has restrictions. Life is ruled by Saturn. The reality of this world is ruled by Saturn. That's not going to change. So we will always be dealing with and living with certain restrictions and limitations as they appear from this external reality. So if we identify our sense of freedom and reality and our life from what we see just out there, well, then we are imprisoned through that model, through that lens. And no one is doing that to you but yourself. So this energy is really powerful to stimulate and to connect to a greater sense of freedom within your own self, regardless of the circumstances outside you. You know, I've heard prisoners talk about how they can feel free while they are incarcerated on death row, who have been incarcerated for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Now, these are individuals that have woken up in prison. And, you know, we could say that the soul chose that journey because that process of waking up was only going to happen in those conditions. And that's, you know, that's really mind blowing, really impressive, and very, very powerful. So if a person can feel totally liberated and free in a cage, then why can't we feel free when we are living in the comfort of our own home? So just something to think about. Um, okay. Just a little bit more on the Jupiter-Venus conjunction. This is, as I said before, it's one of the most beautiful conjunctions. It really stimulates a sense of happiness and joy, a sense of abundance, and really enjoying yourself, enjoying your life, you know, enjoying what's there. We do take things for granted quite a lot, you know, because until something is removed from us or something falls apart or we don't have access to something anymore, that's when we realize just how privileged we were or how lucky we were that we had that thing or person or whatever it may be in our life that we did not really appreciate, you know. So appreciation, I think, is a very important way to be in life, you know, to have perhaps an attitude of gratitude and appreciation as opposed to expectation. Expectations lead to disappointment. We don't have the right to expect anything, really, of anybody for that matter. The only expectation that perhaps we might want to have is the expectation on ourselves relative to our own evolution and growth. and our own level of self-improvement. That's the only expectation I think that we should really have, because nothing is certain, nothing is guaranteed. The only certainty is that we're born. That's a certainty. When we are born, we know we're here. We will leave this body at some point. That's a certainty. How long we'll be here, we don't know. That's not a certainty. Everything that we build in our life is not a certainty either. The level of security that we try to build, security corresponds to Cancer and Capricorn. Cancer is the inner security, and Cancer is the external security. So the inner security comes from our home life, the safety that we either had or didn't have in our upbringing, our home life, and so forth. The external security, which is Capricorn, is the structure that we build around our life. And both Capricorn and Cancer can experience tremendous insecurity when those aspects of life are threatened in some kind of way. And the fact of the matter is that those aspects of life are threatened at different times. They do go through changes and transitions. Now, Aquarius is the sign that helps us free ourselves up from the conditions of those aspects of life that we try and set into stone, that we hang on to in order to feel a sense of safety, because Aquarius and Uranus takes us into the territory of what's unknown, and what's unknown usually makes people feel insecure. So this energy for people who have more of an Aquarian approach to life, who thrive and feel exhilarated with the ride of Aquarius, taking you through these journeys of experiencing new things, being able to be more detached. Cancer is a very subjective sign. It makes us feel very attached to people or home or situations. Aquarius is not like that. Aquarius really is one of the most objective signs, if not the most objective, next to Libra. It's an air sign. It's fixed. It's air. It's a masculine sign, yang in other words. So it has a fixed nature about it. And the fixedness in Aquarius could be that we can become quite fixated or fixed in certain ways of thinking, you could say, that the way we perceive life as well, the ideas that we have around things, we can be very fixed or stuck in a certain way relative to how we think about things. So that's where Aquarius can use some flexibility in being able to employ a different way of thinking. So this new moon, wherever it is in your chart, it starts off a new lunation cycle that will unfold over the next 1 month. It brings in with it a heavy dose of Aquarius, which is not heavy. When I say heavy, perhaps that's not the right word. An abundance of Aquarian energy, which is the ultimate desire to be free, to feel liberated, to feel more authentic. And so here's the energy being poured out to you, giving you this opportunity to embrace this gift. And if you think about the water bearer, which is the picture that we see for the sign Aquarius, it's holding a cup with what appears to be streams of water flowing out of it. Well, that literally corresponds to the wisdom that Uranus, right, was trying to give to humanity, which was why he was punished in mythology. Okay. So Aquarius corresponds to wisdom, intuition. seeing the bigger picture, having more objectivity. So being able to get more in touch with your own individuality, your own ability to be more authentic in your life, and how that speaks to the larger picture relative to the human family. Aquarius stimulates that energy of being more connected to the human family, um, and thinking about that, thinking about our lives and the choices that we make, and how is it that we are serving humanity through the choices that we make, because everything has a ripple effect. Everything we do influences everything else, even though we don't see the ramifications of everything that happens, but everything is connected. So it has to be that way. Everything we do affects something else or somebody else. And Aquarius puts us in that position where it gets us to think about those things. It's not about um, acting for oneself only, it's about acting for the purposes of humanity at large, the soul family. It's also about connecting us more to like minded people, to our what we could call our soul tribe. So there can be an expansion of certain communities or certain groups of people or certain friendships that you may find are really important to you at this time. A journey is activated on that level as well. So, overall, it's an energy that corresponds to freedom and liberation, insight, intuition, activating that within you, regardless of what appears in the external reality, because the external reality is still incredibly challenging in many different parts of the world, because the resetting, the the transformations that are occurring, they they're not at a point where things have settled yet, and I still think that's going to take quite some time, especially since 2021 is heavily colored by a square between Saturn and Uranus. Transiting Chiron, which is down here in the sign of Aries, is forming a sextile to the Jupiter and Venus, which is a beautiful aspect. That's sextiles usually speak to an opportunity. Being sextiled with Venus and Jupiter, Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics. Venus and Jupiter inherently cannot bring harm when they are in a sign that is in detriment or fall, as it's called in the scheme of dignities and debilities. Then what happens is Jupiter or Venus won't get the full benefit of, they won't be able to express their full benefit, as it were, because the sign drains them. Okay, that's what usually happens in the system of a planet being in detriment or fall. They can also speak to operating outside of the consensus reality. That's what a planet in detriment or fall can point to as well. So, Jupiter, Venus, abundance, happiness, joy, in finding your sense of uniqueness, finding the ability to be authentic, and allowing that to shine in the scheme of your life relative to who you are in the community, in the world at large, not just for yourself, right? The later signs in the zodiac always take us through a journey where we can see the bigger picture. It's expansive vision. It's also Aquarius connects to dreams and wishes, because the 11th house connects to dreams and wishes. So a lot of our dreams and wishes can be activated with this energy, provided we remain authentic and we have the courage to step outside of the consensus reality. And we don't do that overnight, because we are all conditioned, and we are not only conditioned from this life, but we are also conditioned from previous lifetimes. So it takes a while for us to process certain things and to even have the awareness of how we may be conditioned in certain ways. So this is just a beautiful opportunity to work on something within yourself that helps you become more authentic and real in your journey, regardless of what's happening outside you. Okay, I think I will leave it there. I really just wanted to just make a few comments. Just a couple of other things, actually. Uranus also, which is the ruler of this new moon, as I said before, it can relate to shock and trauma because it can trigger and stimulate the long-term memory brain, which Uranus corresponds to, and the subconscious mind as well. And most of our behavior is dominated from the unconscious and our subconscious minds. So you can imagine, the most beautiful metaphor to symbolize that is to look at a picture of the ocean and to see an iceberg on the top of it, which is a classic psychological metaphor used to describe the conscious component of our life, which is the iceberg, hence the expression tip of the iceberg. And the ocean describes the rest of our beingness, which would connect to past lives as well. So there's so much going on inside us at any given moment. And when you have Aquarius being activated or Uranus being activated, as it is at the moment quite strongly, there is a chance to break free from conditions, and there is a chance to activate material that needs to come up to the surface in order for us to be able to process, work through it, and move forward. And that's what Aquarius can stimulate. Things can happen suddenly with Aquarius. It's a very unpredictable type of energy, although that's more Uranus, really. Things can be quite erratic and scattered, as I said before. But the most beautiful gift of this new moon is the incredible sudden flashes of insight and intuition that can be sparked and stimulated. And finally, the esoteric ruler to Aquarius, which is Jupiter, as I said, connects to ray number 2, which is love, wisdom. So Jupiter has a very strong presence because it is the ruler, literally, of this new moon. And Jupiter being connected to this new moon because it is in the same sign as the new moon, it is conjunct Venus as well, so two benefics. We have a vibration here of love, wisdom, allowing ourselves to feel a sense of joy and a sense of gratitude and tapping into the wisdom in the heart, the deep, deep, deep wisdom in the heart and in the soul as well, to help us guide our path moving forward. Because every single soul, every single person has an entirely different path and journey. And so this new moon is going to speak to you from the level of your soul's journey, where you are at, what you are ready to receive and awaken to, what you are ready to hear inside you, because Mercury is retrograde. The stimulus will come from a very deep place within. And it can be very sudden, just there can be, radical transformations don't happen overnight necessarily. So when something suddenly occurs that creates a sense of profound insight, the Uranus Aquarian energy here will definitely be the stimulator to activating that, but it will correspond to other layers of things that are going on in your chart. So the new moon activates the birth of a new cycle that will unfold over the next 30 days. But the pattern underneath of what's going to unfold is really about individuation and authenticity. 2 weeks ago with the full moon in Leo, it was about our heart-centered energy, right? Being able to express the most authentic heart energy that we can. And now we're moving forward into being able to express our own individuality and in the path of being more authentic as well. And having Jupiter as the esoteric ruler is a real blessing. That's a really powerful omen for abundance, for growth, expansion, and for overall feeling quite good about where we are at, relative to our own growth. And the insight that can come through can, I think, predominantly be very, very beneficial, because insight is Aquarius, and again, Jupiter is the esoteric ruler. So it's a benefic benevolence. And as Jeffrey was saying before about Uranus corresponding to tuning into God's station, and that's what Mercury is doing at the moment. Mercury is in Aquarius, a Uranus-ruled sign. It's going retrograde. It's got to do with our mind. And we could say the retrograde is taking us into a journey of connecting to God's station, right? God's station mentally, and how we are connecting with those, the thoughts of God, if we can put it like that. In terms of our own growth, where we are standing right now and what it is we need to break free from, have the courage to do that, and have the insight and understanding and enough objectivity to see clearly, which Pallas Athena provides us that gift, the vision of seeing clearly. That's why she's there. She's very close to this new moon. She's only about a degree or so away from this new moon. So she's offering the gift of clear seeing in terms of what it is that speaks to you being totally authentic moving forward. Yeah, that feels good. That feels really good. I love this new moon. I have an Aquarian moon myself, natally. So, yeah, Aquarius is a very strong archetype for me. I love this energy. I just love how it feels. I love the promising future that I feel this shows us, actually. But again, everything starts with ourselves. If it always comes back to, if you want to see change out there, you have to change what's going on in here, or you have to wake things up inside you to be able to see things differently, to get a broader vision and perspective and insight. Alrighty, I think that's it. Yeah, okay. All right. Thanks again for listening, and leave your comments and questions below. I'd be, interested in hearing how you guys are at the moment, and, where this new moon is for you and how that might speak to you, the messages that I gave. And I will be back with more. The Venus class is going ahead this month. I have been running late with my schedule. I do apologize. I've explained that in some of my posts, but in case some people don't see posts, I'm just mentioning it here. So I will be putting out a group email as soon as I can to indicate the dates and the times for that class. Okay, so thank you so much for your patience. I appreciate it. See you soon. Much love. Happy new moon in Aquarius, and don't be afraid to be different and stand out.